Yes guys, it's Brad here, welcome back to the channel. Of course, another match preview for Sheffield United. This weekend the Blades take on Wrexham at Bromley, the final match for the international break. And after a disappointing run of results, the playoffs are over for Sheffield United. Of course, I'll get into the previous match in a minute. Of course, in these previews we talk about the form, one player to watch from each team, then my predicted starting lineup and scoreline. And as always, if you're new around here, leave this video a like, subscribe to the channel. I've got big things coming up these next few weeks, of course, Premier League Championship reviews as well as team of the seasons and the World Cup content. And like I mentioned, as well as the World Cup content, there's going to be plenty of transfer content as well. So if that's the sort of thing you want to see, subscribe to the channel. Of course, last time out for the Blades was that 1-1 draw away to Birmingham City in a game where we got yet another red card, of course this time Femi Sariki in the 23rd minute. But despite being down to 10 men for the majority of the game, we picked up a point, which isn't bad. Of course, that first half was absolute chaos, wasn't it? Of course, us getting the red card, them scoring directly from the free kick, then the penalty incident. Of course, Jack Robinson thought he was taking a goal kick, so he touched the ball to make sure it wasn't rolling. But what he didn't realise is Beadle kept it in place, so it was given as a penalty. We missed it, of course. Of course, it was a poor penalty from City Pep, but some of the discourse about him is mental. People are saying, why is he taking the penalty when the likes of Bamford and Burrows on the pitch? But if he's a designated penalty taker, then why would he not take it? Of course, he's took a couple of penalties this season, dispatched both of them. So I suppose there's no reason for him not to take this penalty when we got awarded it. Of course, just before half time though, Patrick Bamford equalised the game. It was a good finish, don't get me wrong, but of course it was poor goalkeeping from Beadle. When he practically came out and did a star jump to try and stop it. And then the second half, not much happened. Of course, it finished 1-1. Don't get me wrong, it's a solid point on the road. Of course, St Andrews is a tough place to go. But realistically, a point doesn't do anything for us at this stage. Maybe in 3 points doesn't do anything. To get the playoffs now, someone we need to win every single game, literally. And the team would be chasing down is our opponents, Wrexham. Of course, they're sitting in that final playoff spot in 6th. And currently the 3 points clear of the likes of Southampton and Derby. So they'll be looking at this fixture. Of course, a team with nothing to play for, trying to get the 3 points, vital to their season. And it's going to be a tough one to call, let's be honest, because we've got nothing to play for. But let's have a look at both teams' form, starting with Sheffield United. Of course, for Sheffield United, only one win in the last 5, that's QPR away. And I've got to say, this is a run of form that definitely killed our playoff hopes, even if we were slim at first. That Coventry result is understandable, but you can't be losing to teams like Norwich and drawing to teams like West Brom if you want to get the playoffs. No disrespect to them teams, but I think you should be beating them if you want to try and get in that 6th place spot. Especially in our position where we're chasing and we need to catch up ground ASAP. Because at that stage, before that run of form with 10-15 games left to go in the season, you need to be winning every single game nearly. And to get in the playoffs, you can't be having runs where you only win 1 in 5. So it looks like this season it's just going to be mid-table. Of course, we're safe from relegation easily. So these last 8 or 9 games are really nothing to play for. It's not just the results, it's the performances that have regressed as well. If you look back to November to January time, we're scoring 3 goals in it every match, just looking so comfortable, so fluid. Nowadays, we're struggling to score more than 1 and then we just sit back after we've scored. And we're just reverting back to the old wilder tactic of last season. I don't really get why. Like, especially against West Brom, we just looked so dire against a team like that near the bottom. It was a game of few chances, to be fair, for both sides, but they took their chances as well as us. I mean, I say we took our chances, but I don't go, we didn't really take any chances. And then like Norwich, we had a decent first half and the second half just crumbled completely. And we're just sitting back far too often instead of going to get that second goal to try and kill the game. And that's something I hope we work on in the last 7 or 8 games of the season to try and be fluid again. Because we know we have the quality to be beating teams 2 or 3-0, but we just don't show it all the time. And we definitely need to sort our discipline out because we had the most red cards in the Championship this season. And the thing that makes that stat worse is, of course, we didn't get one until Charlton in mid-January. Since then, we've had 6, which is the most in the league, like I mentioned. And it just isn't good enough. You need to stay disciplined to try and win games, to try and get the playoffs. And I feel like some of the games where we've got red, it has definitely let us down. For Wrexham, they've been on mixed form recently. Of course, 3 wins in the last 5. But of course, in the last 3 games, they've only won 1. Of course, 2 losses in that period. And of course, between now and the end of the season, they've got some tough games coming up. Of course, they've got Southampton in a couple of weeks. And that game could be massive to see who gets that 6th place spot. And then the final 2 games of Coventry away and Middlesbrough home, I mean, they are massive. Especially the Borough one, final day of the season, because they could be playing for something as well. The Coventry one, not as much, because I think they will have secured promotion and maybe the title by then. But it's still a tough place to go regardless. With Wrexham, their form seems to be a bit patchy. They go and win like 3 or 4 in a row, then they lose a couple in a row. And I think the difference between them and Southampton could be that consistency. Because of course, Southampton are unbeaten in about 1 or 2 months now. And I think the difference between drawing and losing is more massive than you think. Because it's mentality, of course, if you stay unbeaten instead of losing, it's a bit different mentality. And even though it may only be 1 extra point on the board, it's definitely a confidence booster. Of course, they've got a couple of key players missing, such as Kiefer Moore and Ben Sheaf, so it'll be interesting to see how they fare in these next few weeks. Now that we've looked at the form, let's look at one player to watch out for from both teams, starting with Sheffield United. And for United, I've gone for the brilliant Patrick Bamford. Of course, another goal to his talent against Birmingham, 9 goals for the season now. And of course, playing 20 matches, that's nearly a goal every other game. And he brings so much to the team, I dread to think where we'd be without him. Because I think we could still definitely be in a relegation battle, if not worse. I'm going to look at his per 90 stats because he's not played as many games as others. And I think for a player like him, it definitely shows his true value to the team. Of course, for shooting scores, 0.73 goals per 90, and that puts him in the 98th percentile. And he gets 0.88 XG on target, which is in the 98th percentile, as well as 1.8 shots on target, which is in the 94th percentile. There's one stat I want to take a look at in passing, which is big chances created. He creates 0.24 per 90, which is of course in the 83rd percentile, and per 90 for a striker that isn't bad going. He wins 42.4% of his duels, which doesn't sound much, but that still puts him in the 82nd percentile, which is still respectable. And this one's quite vital as well, 2.04 fouls won per 90, and that puts him in the 90th percentile among strikers. The defending stat shows he works hard for the team as well, of course 0.98 tackles per game, and that puts him in the 75th percentile, which isn't bad for a striker. And he's good at pressing as well, of course 0.49 interceptions per match, and that puts him in a very solid 87th percentile. The stat I want to focus on the most is possession won in the final third, because that's at 0.98, which is the 90th percentile. I think this just shows how hard he works for the team. Of course he's trying to win that ball as much as he can, and when he's leading the line he's very efficient at pressing, of course trying to win that ball back in the final third. And of course he's not got bundles of pace, so he can't really play him behind. So any advantage you can get leading the line, of course, with that hold up play is brilliant. Overall he's been an absolutely fantastic signing for Sheffield United on a free, and like I mentioned, I dread to think where we would be without him. For Wrexham I've gone for Lewis O'Brien. Of course we all know about his qualities in the Championship. He's a very solid box-to-box midfielder, and he's doing well with Wrexham this season, of course 7.26 average rating, as well as 4 goals and 4 assists, which isn't bad at all for a midfielder of his type. Moving straight into passing stats for Lewis O'Brien, of course successful passes in the high percentiles. He's made 761 successful passes, which is in the 97th percentile. Of course he's a very comfortable player on the ball. He'll look to get that passing option every time he gets the ball, and he's not bad at long balls either, of course in the 83rd percentile with 22. And while he's only in the 86th percentile for chances created, it's big chances created I want to focus on, because of them 40 chances, 12 of them have been big chances, which is in the 95th percentile. So it shows he's very efficient when he creates chances, usually big ones. Once again with the possession stats, a lot of green percentiles, including 132 duels won, which is in the 91st percentile, and that percentage won of 52.2% in the 91st percentile as well. Of course he's not the tallest of players, so 23 aerial duels is very respectable, and that puts him in a solid 84th percentile. Like I mentioned, he's very comfortable on the ball as the touches show, 1,404 touches, which is in 92nd percentile, and he's a player that likes to get going quicker. Of course if you do the maths, it's like 2 touches per pass, so he's always looking to try and find that outlet, find another teammate, and more often than not he does so. And as well he does plenty of hard yards defending for the team. Of course 50 tackles puts him in 96th percentile for that. He's intercepted 17 times, which is 93rd percentile, and he'll always try and get his body in the way. Of course 7 block shots, which is 97th percentile. Recoveries as well, 136, which is also 97th percentile, and then 24 clearances, which puts him in the 88th percentile. Overall we all know his qualities in the Championship. He's a very solid player for this level, and he's definitely a consistent performer in that midfield, so we need to do well to try and close him down. And he's that real outlet in that midfield that gets defenders going into attack, so if someone look to close down if we want to try and stop that threat. Now let's have a look who I think will start in this game. Starting off in net, I don't think there's any doubt it will be Adam Davies. Of course since he came into the team for that QPR game he's been quite solid, to be honest, and over these last 4 games he's definitely been one of our best performers, which is mad to say. Like I mentioned, not too much options in the net for now, so it will be Adam Davies still. I mean with 3 or 4 games ago I'd love to see Luke Faxon get a chance, but for now I think he will stick with Adam Davies. At right back is of course an enforced change, Keanu Hoover starting. Costa Rica getting that dubious red card at Birmingham, of course with appeals, and it's been rejected, so if all goes to plan it should be Keanu Hoover starting at right back. Can't see who else would, and it sounds as though he had a decent game against Birmingham. I saw a couple of passes he did. Of course there was that bit of play late on where he played it to Cannon, but Cannon was just offside, but his glimpses like that shows he could be a good player, just doesn't do that a lot of the time. So hopefully a start against Wrexham could do him the world of good, because like I mentioned there's definitely glimpses of confidence, he's just not showing it at full ability yet. The first centre back I think will still be Tanganga, but I think he has been quite poor these last few weeks and his position is under threat, because of course recently Tyler Binden has definitely been outperforming him I think, and I think in the summer we definitely need to solve this issue of the centre backs, because maybe it's a case of Tanganga needing a better partner next. I'm not saying Tyler Binden's bad, but I think maybe someone different, like I mentioned, maybe a different play style, someone like a Suter, more dominant in that back line. Probably not Suter though, because he's been injured for God knows how long, he's probably not fit enough, but someone of his presence maybe could bring the best out of Tanganga as well, because of course we paid a lot of money for him, want to see return on investment, but these last few weeks definitely haven't been great for him. But of course the rest of the season he's been solid, so it'll be interesting to see what happens in the summer with him. Of course the other centre back is a brilliant Tyler Binden. Of course he's been shining recently, one of our best players in the last 5 or 6 matches. Of course when he's playing at the moment he's full of confidence, he's so solid at the back at the moment, and it definitely begs the question, will we sign him permanently in the summer? Because I think especially if Forest stay in the Premier League there is a good chance we go in for him to see what the price is like, because you never know, he could be the one that's starting instead of Tanganga come next season. And it's a real zero to hero story of course after that horror start under Sellers, but I'm glad to see we're getting the best out of him now because he's definitely shining. At left back I think he'll bring Hjelde in for this game. Of course with Harrison Burrows he had a bit of a spurt of form but then it's gone again. I think he will drop him for this game, of course give Hjelde a go, because you haven't seen much of Leo Hjelde. Of course he played a bit at Birmingham, it wasn't too bad. I think it would be interesting to see him get some more minutes, see what he's like, because of course we can't just play Burrows week in week out, he's got to have a rest at some point, so I see this game as a perfect opportunity to do so, to be honest. I think now Harman's back from suspension he'll switch back to the 4-2-3-1. So the first midfielder is of course Sidney Peck. I mean he's been sensational the last few weeks despite a penalty miss at Birmingham. I mean the amount of people trying to get on his back saying he had a good season because of one penalty miss is ridiculous. I mean he's arguably been our best player this season, just been so confident the way he plays in that midfield, and I think some fans are so fickle sometimes, just don't get it at all. To slate a player that young when he's missed one penalty, of course it's a poor penalty, I'm not excusing that, but they just completely ignore the rest of the season that he has been good. I don't understand it personally. He's been brilliant this season, one of my players of the season, and it'd be a massive miss if we were to sell him in the summer. Of course, needs must at this point. Of course, with parachute payments, we're going to have to sell someone. Hopefully it isn't Peck though, because he's a real top midfielder. He'll play Premier League level at some point in his career, but let's just hope it's not as soon as next season. I think he'll stick with Riedewald as the other midfielder. A couple of solid performances recently since he came back from injury, and I'm a massive fan of him in that midfield because he's just such a calming presence. He plays that sort of Vinny Souza role where Peck can go a bit more forward, but in terms of on the ball ability, he has a bit more than Vinny Souza, to be honest. Of course, when he's on the ball, he can control the tempo, speed it up, slow it down a bit, and of course, when things get a bit chaotic, I think him in that midfield is perfect to calm things down. And I've really enjoyed that dynamic, like I mentioned, of Peck and Riedewald in the middle. On the right, I think he will carry on with Andre Brooks. I can't see Chong or Ogbene starting ahead of him in this match, and I've got to say once again, I'm a big fan of Brooks. Of course, he's so electric on the ball. He just seems to pick it up rather than dribbling, just like glides past defenders. And my word, is he a joy to watch. This season, he's developed his game a bit more, added some goals and assists. He's been fantastic. And hopefully, if we keep him in the summer, he could be a big part of a promotion push next season. Because of course, he keeps developing year on year, so hopefully next year could be massive for him. I think Callum White will stay in the team, but of course he'll move back to the central position. Of course, he's been a bit quiet recently, but of course getting an assist at Norwich last week. And he's still having a solid season. Of course, 15 goal involvements for attacking midfielder isn't bad at all. And I think it's his energy and tenacity that wins the games at times. Because he's on every ball, of course he's trying to press the opposition so much. And he always seems to cover every single blade of grass on every pitch ever. So I think whenever he's fit, he has to start. I think on the left, he will bring Gustavo Harmer back into the team. Of course, I spoke about his discipline before because he missed some 2 matches against Norwich and Birmingham. But with the amount of options we have in our squad right now, I think he will bring him straight back in. Of course, Wilder's had a word with him about his discipline. Hopefully he can get back to his best before the end of the season. Because when he's on it, he's really on it. Of course, 7 assists in 2026 in the Championship. I mean, before he got suspended, he was getting assists nearly every single game. He's one of them players, when he's on it, he's really on it, one of the best in the league. But when he isn't on it, he's quite lazy, he doesn't do much out of possession. And I think that's a side of the game that definitely lets him down and why he's not in the Premier League. So I think that's an area to work on for him. But of course, when he's on the ball, in possession, he's absolutely fantastic. And then up front, who else is it but Patrick Bamford? Of course, like I mentioned, another goal to his talent against Birmingham, taking it to 9 in 20 games. And my word, what a signing he's been. If you'd have told me at the start of the season, after Sellers was started, that Patrick Bamford would turn the season around, I wouldn't believe you. I was worried about his fitness, but as soon as he came into the team, he's made instant impact. It took him like a game or something to score. I think he was on it from minute 1. And he's the main reason why we're not fighting relegation at the moment. It'll be interesting to see what he's like next season in a better team. Of course, he'll be a year older, but in a better team, if we can keep him fully fit, I see no reason for 10-15 goals in the league next season. And there we go, guys. That's my team to face Wrexham. It'll definitely be an interesting game. We've got enough to play for. They've got the playoffs to play for. I can see it being quite an entertaining game, so I'm going to go for a 2-2. I think the goals will come from Sidney Peck and Patrick Bamford as we bag a point. But I have a feeling the performance will be much better than the previous weeks. And there we go, guys. That's my preview and prediction for Sheffield United versus Wrexham. As always, if you enjoy this sort of content, leave this video a like, subscribe to the channel. Any subscriptions, any likes, any shares are greatly appreciated, as always. And like I mentioned, big content coming out in the next few weeks. Of course, end of season reviews, team of the seasons, etc. And I want to be on it with the World Cup content in the summer and the transfers simultaneously. So for the next few months, I want to try and stick to 2 or 3, maybe even 4 uploads a week. So if you don't want to miss out on them, subscribe to the channel. And also go and follow my socials, links in the caption, of course my X, my Instagram and my TikTok. That way, if you want, you can see way more of me in short form content. I also upload some of them as YouTube shorts, so go and check that out if you haven't already. If you're a Blades fan, let me know your predictions in the comments and I'll see you guys in the next one.